Hello, I'm Carr. I want you to think for a second. What does a good guy with a gun look like? On paper, the idea of a good guy with a gun is hard to argue against. Americans using their Second Amendment rights to protect themselves, their property, and their country from a tyrannical government. In practice, it's more of a sick joke. Breonna Taylor, a first responder with no criminal record, was literally sleeping in her bed when Louisville, Kentucky police, serving a no-knock warrant, forcefully gained entry into her home. Fearing a break-in from unidentified armed individuals, her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, opened fire towards the police. One of the officers sustained a non-life-threatening injury. Breonna Taylor sustained 8 bullet wounds to which she later succumbed. Kenneth Walker was then arrested and held in custody for attempted murder. At time of writing, the charges against Walker have been dropped and the cops who killed Breonna walk free. Amber Geiger was a police officer who, upon returning home to her apartment complex after work, exited the elevator on the wrong floor and went to what she believed was her apartment. The door was unlocked and she walked in. Botham Jean currently occupied the apartment on account of the fact that it was where he lived and she was on the wrong floor. Geiger then proceeded to shoot Botham Jean dead, unarmed in his own apartment. Philando Castile was driving with his girlfriend and child in the back seat. He was pulled over for a minor violation, and a scared white cop asked Philando to fetch his ID before executing him for reaching for it. Amantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr., legal gun owner, responded to shots being fired in a shopping mall in Hoover, Alabama, by readying his personal weapon that he owned legally and guiding bystanders to safety. The police officer who arrived on the scene opened fire against Bradford, fatally wounding him, even though he was not the active shooting suspect and had not opened fire on anyone. The police proceeded to give changing stories over the following week regarding their justification of their execution of Bradford. Jamel Roberson was a security guard at Manny's Luxury Lounge, a nightclub in a Chicago suburb. Earlier in the evening, there had been reports of gunshots after a fight had broken out in the club. Roberson had drawn his legally owned firearm and detained one of the suspects involved with the shooting when the police arrived, and despite bystanders at the scene shouting to the responding officers that Roberson was in fact security staff and his clearly marked security uniform, the officers opened fire on Roberson, fatally wounding him. It should be noted that this took place after a mass shooting incident in Pittsburgh where a shooter at a synagogue killed 11 people, and the cult leader himself only suggested that more people should start carrying firearms for protection. Need more? Okay. A 38-year-old black off-duty officer with 11 years of service was inside his home when he overheard police outside responding to a crime in progress. Some car thieves had reportedly opened fire on police and wrecked the stolen car before fleeing on foot. The off-duty officer grabbed his service weapon and walked outside to assist his brothers in blue. Initially, the 2 officers at the scene wanted to detain him, but recognized him as a peace officer and asked him to approach. Another white officer who recently arrived on the scene didn't recognize the off-duty officer and, fearing for his safety, opened fire, wounding the black officer. His wounds were not life-threatening. Citizens in this country celebrate a dangerous myth. The idea that you can be the good guy with a gun while living under the unjust hierarchy that is the American state. The state holds a monopoly on violence and exercises it through their military, their cops, their mercenaries, private military contractors, and their prisons. In the eyes of the state, the only good guy with a gun is the one wearing the badge or the uniform. And in the social media sphere, there are plenty of bought and paid shills, ex-cops, and useful idiots ready to heap love and praise on cops and give their killings of Americans the seal of approval. Where does this idea come from?
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
That's Wayne LaPierre, Vice President of the National Rifle Association. That quote, they sell it on t-shirts, they tweet it, they repeat it. And yet the NRA always falls curiously silent when a black man is wrongfully shot by the police, by those same guns that they lobby so much for every citizen to own. The NRA sure loves to bang the drum about good guys with guns who use their guns in defensive situations or stop mass shootings in progress. And you better believe that whenever a pro-gun control candidate at any level of government speaks up, they'll be there to virtue signal about how they are fighting the good fight to stand up against government tyranny. That said, it is a little odd how quickly they will support the one demographic in this country that performs the most confiscations of firearms. I don't know, maybe because they make quite a bit of money running license training programs for police who make up a sizable portion of their membership. Hey, why are street-side executions carried out by police never considered government tyranny? Wouldn't that be the sort of thing that the NRA would want to stand up against? Why does the NRA support and provide training to police agencies across the country who are the ones who actually confiscate guns, often disproportionately from minorities? But we'll get to that point. Yet talk about politicians in suits who are going to come and take your guns.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
I seriously doubt Beto O'Rourke or Hillary Clinton is going to show up at your house and snatch your Bushmaster. So calm down, Mr. Operator. The reality is that the NRA historically does not enjoy the idea of an armed black populace. In 1967, a group of Black Panthers were escorting Betty Shabazz, the widow of Malcolm X, to the airport where they had a tense but non-violent standoff with airport security and San Francisco police officers. They dutifully informed the officers on the scene that they were exercising their Second Amendment rights to carry their firearms and were breaking no state or local laws as their rifles were not concealed. 6 weeks later, the Mulford Act was introduced, a bill prohibiting anyone outside of law enforcement officers from carrying loaded firearms in public. This bill was introduced by Republican Don Mulford of Oakland and backed by the National Rifle Association. Later, it was signed by Governor and future Republican President Ronald Reagan. Black Panthers, led by founder Huey Newton, opted to protest this statewide ban by marching on the State House, armed with their rifles, while the State Assembly was in session. Their rifles were taken by Capitol Police, emptied of ammunition, and returned. They then left the Capitol, roughly 30 minutes after they arrived. Later, Ronald Reagan would come out onto the State House lawn to meet with school children and was heard to say that it was a ridiculous way to solve problems. Wonder what he would think of this. Also wonder why the NRA sees this as okay, but not this. Man, it's almost like their history as an organization is inconsistent at best, and at worst shows a notable leaning towards lobbying and the profits of firearms manufacturers. If you've been keeping score, actual good guys with guns, even ones who support the rights of all citizens to bear arms and reject gun control legislation, are often targeted and even killed by the same people who believe that good guys with guns stop bad guys with guns. Now, none of this is to be seen as me advocating against blacks owning guns. On the contrary, as the Republican Party continues to curtsy to the spray-tanned fascist in the White House, and the Democratic Party opts to continue making these Bush League moves in the electoral politics game, now, more than ever, blacks need the means to defend themselves and their communities. Make no mistake, there are people in this country who are eager to ignite a race war, and they usually look like this. And the Venn diagram between people who can't wait to drop all pretense and start indiscriminately killing minorities, and the people who subscribe to this American cowboy fantasy of being a heroic lone gunman, is pretty close to a circle. In the eyes of the state and the corporatocracy, there is no good guy with a gun, and it's getting more and more obvious who the bad guys are.